This is Brescia Borden. In 2014, she and a friend were walking down the street, and they saw a bicycle and a scooter sitting alongside the road. They hopped on them, and they rode them off down the street. A lady came running out of the house, screaming at them that they were her kids' toys. So they stopped, they ditched the bike and the scooter, and they quickly walked away. Later, they were picked up, and they were charged with petty theft and burglary. Now, it's important to note that Brescia had 4 prior offenses. Each one of them were juvenile misdemeanors. This is Vernon Prater. In 2013, at the age of 41, he was picked up for stealing $80 worth of goods at Home Depot. Now, Vernon also had priors, but they were not juvenile misdemeanors. He had 2 armed robberies and 1 attempted armed robbery. Now, at the time, the courts were experimenting with a program that would do some data analysis, run some algorithms, and try to determine if somebody was high risk of being a repeat offender or not. Now, the algorithm looked at Brescia, it looked at her 4 prior juvenile misdemeanors, and it determined that Brescia was a high risk. They gave her a score of 8. They looked at Vernon, they looked at Vernon's 2 armed robberies, 1 attempted armed robbery, and the algorithm determined that he was low risk of being a repeat offender, and they gave him a score of 3. Hindsight being 2020, we can look at this and we know that they was absolutely wrong. She has had no subsequent offenses. He is serving 8 years for grand theft. Now, in isolation, this is disturbing enough. But it gets worse when you look at the actual aggregate data. So ProPublica dug in, and they wanted to see how often does this sort of thing happen. And so they looked at all the times that the algorithm got something wrong, and what they found was very disturbing. They discovered that if you were white, the most likely mistake that the algorithm would make was in assuming that you were low risk, that you were not going to be a repeat offender, when in fact you ended up repeat offending. If you were black, it made the opposite mistake. It assumed that you were high risk, when in fact you ended up not having any subsequent offenses. The algorithm that was in parts built to pull away human bias was itself biased. There's a lot of talk right now about whether or not technology is political, whether or not technology is biased. But of course it is. It can't help but be political and biased because we, the people building it, are political and biased, and we infuse those biases into the technology we build, whether or not we realize it. And sometimes, in retrospect at least, it's obvious. But here's the thing. We don't build algorithms like this. I'm willing to bet most of you in here do not do things like this. We're at Fluent. We're front-end developers. We're designers. We write HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We work on retail sites, on social media sites, for startups, for financial institutions. We don't impact people's lives in the same way. But our limited perspective and our biases end up influencing the way that we build each and every day. And even if the impact isn't quite as obvious at first glance, it's still there.